G'day folks, welcome to this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. Got a nice little subject for you this week. To have a little farmhouse set in amongst some bushland with a nice big mountain in the background. So it's a photo that I took some time ago, but I like it's got that sort of path, or I guess it's a path that leads into the field there. And then you've got the farmhouse just sitting off in the distance a little bit, surrounded by nice big trees. And then that big blue, bluey grey, green mountain in the background. As always, we're going to use the Moore method of painting, which is 3 simple steps, 3 colours and 3 brushes that we've taught to thousands of people around the world so far. We'll just come down to our palette here. So those 3 colours are going to be predominantly our blue will be our ultramarine blue, our red will be our permanent alizarin crimson, which is a cool transparent red. And then our yellow ochre will be our main yellow, although I will use our booster colour, which is our cadmium yellow light. Let's get underway now with step 1 of the Moore method of painting. And the board that I'm painting on here today is a 12-inch by 16-inch MDF board. And I'm going to start off with a little flat brush, as you can see. A little touch of thinner in there. And if you're using acrylics, exactly the same process, just use a little touch of water just to thin this down. So get a little bit of that blue and the red there together, just to get a bit of a dark happening. And we're going to do our drawing step. And the key here is identify a few big shapes, place them correctly onto the canvas, right? Or the painting surface, in this case it's a board. But you want our paint at this stage to be ink-like consistency. We don't want it to be a thick consistency. Now, we need to identify big shapes. Let's just have another look at the photo. So we have a look at the photo. Our main big shape is, of course, the house, the farmhouse there. Then we've got the foreground field. That's the second big shape. Then there's 2 dominant trees there, and then you've got a background row of trees. So you treat all the trees as one shape initially, right? So now we've got 3 shapes plus the mountain, 4 shapes, plus the sky's 5 shapes. That simplifies the whole process down and makes it really easy to see what it is that we need to do. Big problem for a lot of beginners is they become overwhelmed with a subject, a photo, or if they're planning plein air, they look at the subject and go, my God, there's so much information there. I don't know where to start. Okay, and I've heard that time and time again, and it stops people in their tracks. So we know that in this photo there's sort of a horizon line that runs right through there, which is our foreground field. It separates our middle distance from our foreground field here. And we're going to place that little farmhouse around about here. Don't make it too big. Okay, it's got a little roof running that way. Okay, it runs down there. And then it's kind of a weird angle that the photo's taken on as far as the farmhouse is concerned, but everything else in it works well. But you can sort of see the opening at the back of this wall here. So we'll cover that in tree. So the tree is going to run through most of that there. Okay, a couple of windows. And there's a bit of a veranda that's coming out that way. Okay. Running through there. So this is obviously our main subject of interest here. So that's why I would spend just a little bit of time getting that right. There's a fence there. Okay, that fence probably runs to that side there. And it's got a little front veranda as well. A couple of posts. We're going to keep this really simple. We don't want to overcomplicate this painting. There's a little chimney there. So just keep it really, really simple. Just get the main feel of it. Don't worry about details at this stage. They will come, okay? So with that, we can see that there's trees that run up in through there. And these are middle distance trees, okay? So they're not going to be too strong in value. And this one on the right-hand side, maybe we just change the shape of it a little bit. Actually, we'll bring it up to there. I'll just make it more of a sort of a classic gum tree shape. So I'm just going to make it that shape for the moment, and you'll see how we'll then develop that out. And just look at the balance now. So we've sort of downplayed these two main trees, and I think that's going to work. We'll get the shapes right as we develop it there. Okay, so that leaves our distant mountain. Now our distant mountain is running, well, yeah, the problem is if I reduce that, and let me just have a look here, it's going to be running there. Actually, no, it'll still work. We'll just run it through there like that. Okay, there is this sort of meandering path that... Now, how simple is that, right? Anyone can do what I've just done. Just looking at the photos, simplifying it down into a handful of big shapes, and then just popping those big shapes onto the canvas where we need them to be. And I've taught this to 25,000 students around the world, and they've all got great results when they follow the process because it makes it really easy for people. So this is where we start to now get down our darks initially, okay, and set up our values pattern really in the painting. So let's do that now. So usually when I'm blocking in color, I'd go to a bigger brush. This is like a 1-inch hog hair brush here, okay. So I'll dip that in a little bit of thinner, or if you're using acrylics, a bit of water, okay. And we'll get some of the blue, we'll get some of the red, we'll get a dark happening here, okay. And I'm going to take a little touch of the yellow ochre. Okay, just because I want to grey it back, and by adding that third primary in, it will grey back the paint a little bit, and I can just get a little touch of this white, not too much at this stage. Okay, white's a little bit dry there from something else that I was doing, but just get a little touch of that white. How's that looking? Okay, it's not bad. Let's just get a little touch of thinner in there. Now we don't, in our blocking phase, we don't want this paint going on too thickly, because then we're going to come back and we're going to do our highlights and finishing touches and details and so on. And that's going to go over this wet paint. Now if you're painting with acrylics, of course, you can pause and allow the underpainting to dry off. But if you're using water mixable oils or traditional oils, like I'm using water mixable oils here today, you don't have that luxury unless you're leaving it for a day or two. Okay. Now notice I've just made some interesting edges around the outside of that tree. Why have I done that? Because that's what trees have. Okay, don't paint it as a round, hard edge. Big mistake that a lot of our beginner painters make, and if you can avoid making that mistake, you'll end up a more realistic looking collection of trees here. Okay, now so this one here, we've sort of got this shape here, but I'm going to cut back into it so we don't have that issue, and I'll just maybe pop a little bit out there. Okay. So they're basically the same sort of value, but the row of trees just immediately behind there, they're going to not be the same value. So I'm going to add more blue, and what adding the blue does is it will cool it down. Okay, if you've taken our color mixing course, you'll know all about cool colors and warm colors and values and so on. We want to cool that down, but not too much. We don't want it to be blue because the mountain behind it's going to be blue. Okay. So cool it down, just get a little touch more red in there. And there should be a noticeable difference. If not, then we have to remix. Okay, so there's not a big enough difference there between the tree we've already got there and the one we've just put down. So I'm going to take more white into that. Perhaps just a touch more of the yellow ochre because I want to reduce the saturation. Okay. And then let me just test that. Okay, that's a bit better. So it's definitely cooler, slightly lighter in value. And we can work that row of trees in the back there now. So I can start to shape up the farmhouse. Just by painting the reverse of it, or the negative shape. Okay. We'll tighten that up as we go, so don't worry if it's not 100% perfect, but it's a good opportunity to start just getting a feel for it. Okay, and then up into the trees here. Okay, now when we pop highlights onto that main tree, and not so many highlights onto these background trees, we're going to make a nice separation between them. So it'll all be working well. So you can see as we start to develop this row of trees here, you can see automatically that it's looking further away than the two we did before. And that's purely by understanding values, temperature, and saturation. Okay, now if you don't have a handle on those, if you're just starting out or whatever, then I do highly recommend our colour mixing course at the Learn to Paint Academy, because it takes you through all those really basic fundamental elements, as well as how to mix colour, of course, which is a big challenge for a lot of people starting out. They're not really sure exactly how to mix the colours that they want. And it's challenging to be a good artist if you don't have a feel for colour and how to mix it. Push the blue in this a little bit. It's going to have a little touch of red and it's going to have a little touch of yellow. We're going to really get the blue into it, make it a nice strong blue mountain. Because mountains they grey off, well, they go a bluey grey. And the reason why they go a bluey grey is the further away they are in the distance and the more atmosphere there is between you and it. What happens is the yellow disappears out of the range first, and then the red, and that leaves you blue. Now they don't disappear completely. That's too strong in value. That's too dark. So I'll just lighten that off. They don't disappear completely, but they are certainly reduced, and that gives you a bluey grey, which hopefully we're getting close to here. Let's just test that. Okay, that's better. That's better. I think that'll work when we put some green on that tree. So I might just go just a touch lighter in there. There we go. That's probably it there. Get some of that thinner. And let's just now, because we put that paint on fairly thinly for the trees, the darker the trees, we can just touch into it. Don't smudge into it. Little light touches here and there will enable us to just work into the darks that we've already got. See how I'm just working into the tree there? Because some of those darks are already starting to dry off a bit because we painted them quite thinly. Okay, so that's a big key. Even if you're doing this with acrylics, that would be important, unless you're going to stop and have a break before you tackle this part. I don't mind a little bit of smudging into those edges of the trees, because it just makes it a little bit blurry. We don't want hard shapes and edges at that point. Okay. Looking good. So getting a nice setup there with our values. I think this is going to work quite nicely, this one. And look, lastly, we've got our sky there. And that'll finish off our blocking. I'm not going to do the field as part of the blocking. I'll do that as part of our finishing touches. So let me just give the brush a little bit of a clean. Now there's not much in that sky at all. It's just a light, pretty much a light version of that mountain colour. So I'll just get some white, dirty it up a little bit with that mix. Okay, a little bit thinner. Not too much thinner because I don't want to come back to my sky. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure we only have to paint it once. And important that along the top of that mountain ridge that we have a soft edge there. But it's coming along nicely. I'm going to take a little bit of a break just to let that paint just set off a little bit. So maybe an hour. If you're an acrylic painter, good time to stop right here and let that fully dry and then come back to it. So again, maybe half an hour to an hour for acrylic painters. So I'll see you after I've had a short break and we'll do step 3. Cheers. Okay, welcome back folks. We're going to do step 3 now. And I'm pretty happy with the way this one's coming along. So I think we'll turn into a nice little painting. What we'll do, we'll start out getting a little bit of work into the cottage here, or the farmhouse, and then we'll progress into the other areas that we need to work on. So let's get busy and get painting. Okay, so for the cottage, I'm going to obviously go to a slightly smaller brush now. We'll come down to a medium-sized flat brush like this one here. Okay, and first thing, I'll just get a little bit of a dark. So I'll get our ultramarine blue, our alizarin, permanent alizarin crimson. Okay, this will probably end up being one of our darkest darks. Well, not probably, but it will be. We've just got this little, right here, we're going to put that little bush in front of the farmhouse there. So I'll just pop that in. Okay, and pop a little bit of shadow underneath there. Bottom of the farmhouse there. Okay, so with that done, I'll give that brush just a little bit of a clean up. And the colours that the farmhouse are in the photo, I'm not really a big fan of that sort of murky yellow. Instead, I'm going to paint a shadow version. First, I'll get some white, but a shadow version of that wall. So assuming it was a white wall, but it was in shadow is what I'm trying to say. So what that will mean is we'll start with white and then we'll add in a shadow color into it. And then we'll do the roof a lot lighter. Okay, so we'll start off with some of that white there. We'll take this shadow tones. Okay, we'll just darken it with those shadow tones a little, not completely, but a little. Put it on the blue side so it's slightly cooler. Okay, and notice I'm just dragging the brush, the heads of the brush through that paint there, and come up here. And just pull that in here. Like so. A little bit of a veranda here, sticking out there, and there's one sticking out there. Okay. What else do we have? We then have slightly darker. In the back here. So yeah, just be aware I am changing up that colour scheme a little. Okay. Try and avoid picking up too much of that dirty dark tone there. A little bit of it you're going to pick up, but that's a little bit's not a problem. A little touch of white. Okay. Let's pop a little mark in for that. And a little bit of shadow. Okay, so the light's, we're saying the light's coming in that way, so this shadow is going to just sit in there like so. I'll just grab another big brush now, and what we want to do is we want to look at this background mountain here, and I want to just get a little bit of highlight here and there in for a little bit of tree effect. So we had this blue mix here before. I'll mix white into it, and I'll mix some yellow ochre in there, and a little touch of the alizarin crimson. So what I'm doing is I've got a lighter value of that blue that we had before, and I've just lightened it off and I've warmed it up a bit. Okay, probably needs a bit more blue back in it. So because it's way off in the distance, it's important that we have a very narrow range of values. Okay, so we don't want much contrast. When things are in the foreground, you'll have a lot more contrast in your values generally. That's a little bit of an advanced concept, and if you're not really sure what values are and how to use them, then don't worry too much. You'll see what I mean as we do this. Now, I've made up a mix. What I want to do is just test that mix now, just to see how that's going to work. So there's going to be a light catching on this side of this mountain. Okay, and maybe it's coming down into some ridges in here. Okay, just soften that out. Now, I did say there's a bluff in there as well, so we want to make sure we capture that. Get the tree tops along there. So we need to keep this as subtle as we can. Okay. So I'll just scrape off a little bit of that paint, not too much. Just a little tiny bit. And then let's just figure out where that's going to go. It sort of runs in through there. So this is just that rocky face that's sticking through the trees there. So just soften it into that blue that's there already. We don't want it to, as I said, we don't want it to stick out too much. And notice I'm leaving some gaps as well. I don't have this solid, massive, that rock face. There's plenty of breathing space in there. So this should be a much stronger and punchier tone than what we were using before. See that? That's what we were just using. This is what we've got now. So I'll push that even a bit further perhaps. Just pick up some of that bluey grey just to stop it getting too far out there. take a swipe of that. Now I'm just going to experiment here. I just thought for the sake of doing something different that we'll just utilize the palette knife for a bit of foliage. And it's a good skill to have to be able to use the palette knife well, I think. In fact, we might even do a painting demo where we're just using the palette knife, just for something different in a future episode, so look out for that. Now that underpaint, that dark shadow tone that we've got there is still wet, so I'm smudging it into that, but it's giving us some nice effects. But you just got to be careful of how much pressure you put on there, because you can easily turn it into a bit of a muddy mess as well. Okay, just on that. So I've pretty much used the one value all over for this highlight tone. You probably could have mixed a couple of steps, but just created something different, a little bit of a different tree in there. And now I'll take some blue and some of that yellow. Okay, we'll just get more of a green version of that. Okay, and that green version, we can now come in here and just introduce that in here. And again, quite thick and wet paint underneath there. So load up your brush, make a couple of applications of the paint, but then pull that brush through the paper towel, because it's picking up that underpaint and dirtying up your brush. I'm wondering if we can just take that tone it down a little. Maybe just get a little bit of that in here and there in the background. But it's still very subtle, isn't it? Do much more than, because I do want to keep it quite subtle. All right, so that leaves us the fun part here now. The brush just to slide this all clean off. And the fun part now is going to be getting in our field here, our foreground field. So it's going to be mostly yellow ochre and alizarin crimson. So we'll take a big chunk of the yellow ochre, take some white, mix that up, a little bit of alizarin crimson. Okay. Get a few different versions of that mix. And a little touch of thinner, not too much, but just enough to make the paint flow nicely. And let's come along through here. Okay, so I'll work it along there. Watch that dark. And then if you look closely at the photo, there's little bits of grass flicking up here and there. So I'll just lay a little bit on the tip of the brush. And we'll just flick up bits of grass. Last one was a bit wild. Just tone that back a bit here and there. Okay, so you can see now clearly got a much stronger foreground starting to emerge, which is good. So the grasses here are mostly burnt off. Well, there's a bit of green closer to the path, so let's just keep that in mind as we progress this along. So it gets a little greener, so I'll just get some green happening. Gets a little bit greener in through here. And as that path wraps around. A couple of little touches a bit further up just to connect it. Okay. A little touch of that green needs to come in here. For that bush. And going along quite nicely here, I think. All seems to be under control. Alrighty, now that gives us our path. I think the path's probably a good thing to do now with our palette knife. So we'll get more yellow ochre, more alizarin crimson, and a couple of different tones in there. But we don't have to follow what's in the photo laboriously, as we've already seen. We mix up something that we think is going to work. Okay. And the important thing is to try not to have too much of the same colour all the way through it. Just need a little bit of variety of tone in there. Okay, so I'll just mix it up a little. No right or wrong way to do it, really. It's not like a made path or road, so it's just really where they've been driving the vehicles through there. All right, so last thing left to do. I mean, as with all of our demonstrations, there's lots and lots of things you could do to really fiddle with this and turn it into something, you know, a really great little painting. But the purpose of our demos is really just to give you the basic working method, rather than, you know, it's a demo, it's not a complete painting, so just keep that in mind. But I'd invite you to continue to detail it up where you see fit. Okay. What I do see is we've got a couple of little tree trunks there, a couple running. Just a little hint of them, don't overpaint them. Some of that white. Just the trunk colour in here. something like that. And I think that's about where we're going to leave it, folks. I think it's come up reasonably well for a good little demo. Pretty simple little painting. There's a definite sort of jump from this foreground and the center of interest to the background areas there. As I said, there's lots of things you could do to really keep detailing it up. However, for the purpose of learning how to do a simple little landscape with quite a good amount of separation in there, I think it's a good one to have a play around with, and I think we've achieved our objective here today. So folks, hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. I'm pretty happy with the way our little farmhouse has come up there, and I've enjoyed doing it, so I hope you have too. Now, if you'd like to see all the episodes of Learn to Paint TV, make sure you go to the web address that I'll pop underneath me here. And if you haven't done so already, please go to our website at the Learn to Paint Academy, and the web address is here, www.learntopaint.academy. And on that page, you will see a button where you can register for a free course. We give away a complete free course with 4 different painting demonstrations in it. It's our way of giving you an introduction to what we do at the Learn to Paint Academy. And if you're a beginner to intermediate painter and you're looking to improve your landscapes and seascapes and paint with an impressionist style, but with a degree of realism as well, then you'll love what we do. And we've taught more than 25,000 students so far. We'd love to see you there as well. So make sure you pop over, www.learntopaint.academy, and I'll see you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers.